Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Ben Zong, and I'm the Online Communications Manager with the California Festival Partnership. Thank you for joining us today. Currently, we have about a quarter of our attendees logged in, and so we're just going to have a casual conversation with our panelists for the first few minutes as we wait for the rest of the folks to log in. But Keith, I know you're in the LA area, and you've seen the Energy Observer come through. What's your impression?
Wow. So I feel like a school kid, so I apologize to everyone if I act like one. You know, I've seen the photos, I've seen Energy Observer as it's gone around the world, and you know, you get there, and I got a chance to get on the boat. I got a really quick tour. Others have gotten longer ones, but it was a great tour, and it was great. So I'm gonna stop embarrassing myself by being overly excited, and why don't we have a couple slides that we wanted to show. Energy Observer was expected in San Francisco this week, but because of weather conditions, they had a stopover in Morro Bay. For those of you who are unfamiliar with California, it's on California's central coast. And these photos, these are great photos, but they don't do the boat and they don't do Morro Bay justice, but they're great. I'm sure they had a lovely time there. It's beautiful. It's God's country, as we like to say. And then if we could go to the next slide. So they postponed their visit to San Francisco by a week, and they'll be out on Pier 9. The public is welcome to visit, but there will not be onboard visits possible. But drop on by. It's amazing to see, even from the dock. It's an incredible vessel. That's all I can say. I'll stop talking. I'm really excited about this, and sorry, Ben.
No, that's great. And so with that, I do see that we have a little over half of our attendees on. So I think we can go ahead and get started with the webinar. And so with that, first, again, thank you for joining our California Hydrogen Policy Series. My name is Ben Zong, and again, I'm the Online Communications Manager for the California Partnership. This is the fourth of several briefings that we'll be hosting. A couple of administrative items before we get started. We have this webinar will be recorded. The recording and the presentation slides will be posted later next week. Once posted, an email will be sent out to all attendees with a link to where the postings are located. During the webinar, everyone will be muted. However, we will have a Q&A session at the end, and so please use the questions feature to ask questions to the panelists. Also, during the webinar, we'll have the camera on. If you'd like, you can camera settings on the GoToWebinar tool, either hide the camera or to change the size if you like to see the full presentation. At the California Partnership, we're a collaboration of over 50 industry and government organizations, and we work to bring organizations together in the market to help. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bill Ulrich, Toyota Partnership Executive Director. Bill?
Great, thank you, Ben. I'm so glad to have this today. Thanks everyone for being here and joining us for the briefing on the Energy Observer as it visits California on its trip around the globe. And what they're doing is just absolutely fascinating, powering this vessel and bringing it to us, powered by wind, by solar, by batteries, by hydrogen and fuel cells. This is just something else. This briefing is brought to you by the partnership, along with the California Hydrogen Business Council, the California Hydrogen Coalition. We've had a few of these already, and we seek to do a few more with the intention of this very type of opportunity, bringing you something new and exciting about the market that's developing before us. When we first learned the Observer was coming to California, we really wanted to learn more about their work and share it with ourselves. We wanted to know, but also share it with all of you and in California and beyond. You know, so much is happening around the globe with hydrogen, and we want to make sure our audience understands that California has many climate allies that are looking to us as partners in hydrogen. So let's kick this off. Let's get going. Today we have a number of representatives, especially from the Energy Observer team, which is where we're going to start. along with representatives from 4 of their key partners, including Liquide, CCM CGM, Engie, and Toyota. And I'll introduce each of them before they present. And so let's start with the head of the vessel, the captain. We're pleased to welcome Captain Victorien Arroussard, the captain and founder of Energy Observer, and Louis-Noël Vivet, Director of Development and Partnerships. Captain Arroussard brings with him substantial maritime experience as today's briefing, not only as a professional sailor and racing professional, but as a former officer on several vessels in the Merchant Navy, some of these traveling as far as Antarctica. One of the most significant turning points in his life took place during a transatlantic passage when a diesel generator broke down in the middle of the Atlantic. Despite his being surrounded by an abundance of renewable energies. It was then that he decided to make a switch, to transition in a race for smart energy rather than racing for trophies. So I want to welcome Captain Arroussard and Mr. Vives, and I'd like to turn the program over to you.
Okay, good day, everybody. So I am with Victorien here, who will introduce you to the project. We have some slides and some very short videos to show you today. And so, Victorien, if you can start.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good day to all. I am Victorien Arroussard, founder and captain of Energy Observer. There is a problem. You have my screen? Yes?
Yes.
You have my screen? Okay.
Yes.
I'm very pleased to be there with you to introduce you the first hydrogen renewable energies vessel and here 7 years around the world trip. Sorry, I have a problem. Oh, okay, perfect. For decades, I am a merchant ship officer and offshore racer. As a merchant ship marine officer, I have both experienced and witnessed the immense pollution of the shipping industry and the alarming degradation of our marine ecosystems. As an offshore racer, I took part in a dozen of transatlantic races, solo and crewed, and numerous international regattas in the sailing championships. Competition requires rigor, performance, and a high level in technology and innovation. And I wanted to apply these values to the energy transition rather than sport trophy hunting. For me, the triggering story was during the transatlantic race when I experienced the total breakdown of my generator in the middle of the Atlantic with faulty solar panels. This means no more electronics, no autopilot, no communication. I was totally helpless with no energy while I was surrounded with sun, wind, and hydropower potential. So many renewable energies I wasn't unable to use due to my lack of anticipation and our dependence to the fossil energies. This event triggered the idea of designing a clean and smart vessel able to optimize the energy mix provided by Mother Nature, a vessel offering the same level of comfort as a standard yacht, but with the freedom of sailing, thanks to an innovative energy system allowing to produce and store renewables thanks to the hydrogen. Let's discover this boat in this short video.
Energy Observer is the first vessel autonomous in energy that doesn't emit greenhouse gases or fine particles. This electrically propelled boat of the future works thanks to a mix of renewable energies and a system of hydrogen production by seawater electrolyzers, fully decarbonized, decentralized, and digitalized. First French ambassador for the Sustainable Development Goals, Energy Observer has undertaken an incredible odyssey for the future. To meet the pioneers reinventing economy, mobility, agriculture, and housing, building a more supportive world and finding solutions to protect biodiversity. More than a boat, Energy Observer is the true media for the planet, a documentary series, 100% positive digital media. Energy Observer Solutions, which will promote the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to the general public. With Energy Observer, we are proud to contribute to the energy transition. We are proud of making the maritime community one of the pioneers of a cleaner world.
As you can see, Energy Observer is not only a laboratory ship, it is a group carrying more than 60 engineers, technicians, and executives with different missions. First of all, the Odyssey carrying our energy transition and hydrogen ambassador mission. Energy Observer Foundation carrying the pedagogic and expertise about the energy maritime transition. Energy Observer Production in charge of producing the documentary films broadcasted by Canal Plus Group. And the last project, EODEV, developing hydrogen affordable and renewable solution for onshore and offshore application that Louis-Noël will introduce in a short while. Let's get back to our floating laboratory. You have understood that this electric boat is autonomous in energy and that she uses a mix of renewables, but the issue with renewables is their intermittency. What can we do if there is no sun at night or when there is no wind at all? We rely on the hydrogen produced on board from seawater electrolysis. Hydrogen is our energy carrier, our range extender, our long-term energy storage, providing many advantages. Energy Observer is more than a boat. It is a scale model of tomorrow's energy world, a floating, decarbonized, decentralized, and digitalized smart grid. How does it work? We charge our batteries with solar panels and hydrogenation. When they are full, we value the surplus energy by producing hydrogen or one from seawater, while selling the game is to balance propulsion and onboard life consumption directly with the renewable available. When the sun and wind deteriorate, to extend our autonomy, the fuel cell converts our hydrogen into electricity. Here is our energy mix. Solar energy is the leading source of power on board Energy Observer. In total, we have 202 square meters of solar panels with 35 kilowatt peak power. Different technologies are developed on board to optimize the surface available. Flexible panels able to fit to any curved surface. Anti-slip panels on the deck on which the crew can work. Vertical and colored panels that can fit almost everywhere. And bifacial panels. These panels can catch the sun rays on both sides, including the deck and water reverberation. Other advantage, the cells are naturally ventilated, and this allows them to provide a higher efficiency. At the end of the story, these panels offer 30% more energy than traditional flat monophase panels. During the first navigation from 2017, Energy Observer tested vertical wind turbines to produce electricity and a giant kite to reduce our consumption. The system did not match our expectations. Since 2019, the ship has been equipped with a pair of ocean wings, combining the advantage of both wind turbine and kites. With this innovation, we save energy, and in favorable wind conditions like track winds, we can even produce hydrogen while sailing. It is a concrete steps to reduce the environmental impact of international maritime transport. Following the forecast on a wide panel of chips, the results are very promising, from 18 to 42% of energy saved. It is a safe twin propulsion system, simple and fully automatic, based on the America's Cup rigid wings technologies, 2 times more efficient than a traditional rig, fully automated and piloted from the wheelhouse, no sails, easily maneuverable. They can be furled automatically to face wind condition, fine adjustment available in automatic mode. They will allow us to raise our energy production while sailing using our reversible propellers, and our electric motors turn the other way around and produce electricity up to 8 kilowatts. The energy observer propulsion is carried out by 2 electric motors of 42 kilowatts, and these motors are very efficient, with about 97%. Our short-term storage is based on 16 Li-ion batteries feeding our motors via the 400 volts bus network, and they can store 100 kilowatt hour, but their weight is 1,400 kilos. Let's talk about our hydrogen chain with our production system from the seawater. First, we distilled the water with a multi-stage reverse osmosis system. Then the water gets deionized to obtain a very pure water suitable to be electrolyzed. Electrolysis uses electricity to split the water in hydrogen and oxygen. Our electrolyzer can produce 4 nanometers of pure hydrogen and uses 3.6 liters of deionized water per hour. It's 70 times lighter than air and takes a big volume at 1 bar. Donc our compression system uses 2 stages, 180 bars and 350 bars to reduce this storage volume. Even if the 700 bars norm would provide nearly twice as much energy for the same volume, we did not go to it for energy consumption reasons. Our long-term storage is based on 8 per 332 liters tanks, storing 62 kilo of hydrogen in total, as much energy as 230 liters of gasoline. They are fitted on the deck and benefit from a natural ventilation, and we have a forced ventilation system in case of any leak. This volume brings a total storage of 2 megawatt-hour, 1 megawatt-hour of electricity, and 1 megawatt-hour of thermal energy that we store for the heating system and the hot water for the crew. Here is our previous fuel cell developed by the CEA in France, producing 26 kilowatts of heat and electricity. And since the launching of EODF in 2019, we have installed the REX-H2 system developed by EODF and Toyota. And I can testify that we have used this system for more than 15,000 nautical miles, and that is very reliable and efficient. Here are our two monitoring touch screens. It's our electronic managing system. That's the brain of the ship, based on a series of automations driving all the system on board. 21 graph sets connected to 200 alarms and more than 1,000 sensors, 12 analogic and 13 digital actuators. We collect more than 1,050 data on the network hub in real time. This is the whale house, and this is the living area leading to the 6 cabins. Louis-Noël?
Yeah. So after having presented our ship, let's just have some few words about the Odyssey. It started in 2017 with the first navigations around Europe. We made a tour de France to get the technology reliable. We wanted to stay close to the engineers because it was a world premiere to have an electrolyzing system on board the boat. Then we went to the Mediterranean in 2018 to test the systems with very high temperatures, up to more than 50 degrees Celsius in Israel and Tunisia, for instance. And then we just went around Northern Europe in 2019, including the challenge to go to north up to the Spitzberg, north of the Arctic Circle. Then 2020 arrived, a very strange, very weird year, with the Atlantic crossing and a long stopover in the Caribbean during the pandemic. So the crew had to stay about 2.5 months in total autonomy because they didn't have the right to go anywhere anyway. So altogether, we have organized about more than 60 stopovers in 28 countries. We have sailed more than 30,000 nautical miles, about 35,000 nautical miles now, and we have welcomed more than 300,000 visitors in our 450 square meters village, which followed us everywhere around the world, except this year because of the pandemic that we cannot bring our big village with us. So we come along with the boat and with the crew. Above that, we have produced more than about 13 documentary films for the Canal Plus Group about the pioneer of the sustainable development that we meet in our voyage, and we have made more than 300 short films and web series about including 128 solutions which are available free on our special server. That you should check on solution/energy observer. We know that these stopovers are very efficient in terms of political impact. They are very effective on the energy stakeholders because we gather and we accelerate some projects with the local authorities and policymakers. And we can testify that some projects, for instance, in Northern Europe, became concrete after our visit, as in Antwerp, for instance, where a brand new hydrogen station project was under validation. And because after the visit of the ministers and many European Commission officials, the project took off. So we went in all these ports and exhibitions just to keep on convincing and showcasing the system, and it's quite efficient.
Oh, sorry.
We have many action of awareness and education. Because we spread and promote, the 17 SDGs to help to raise awareness and change behavior. We federate the expertise to accelerate the maritime energy transition and the fight against maritime pollution, because these are our core business. We are sailors, so we want to convince. First of all, we want to convince our maritime communities. And to raise awareness and transmit our experience and know-how in the field of sustainable energy mix and hydrogen, especially to schools, engineering schools, universities. So that's a very important mission for us today. Our program around the world, because the Odyssey is far from being over. We are now in California, but during the next years, during the following 4 years, we will keep on exploring the biodiversity and the environment. We will focus on exploring the energy innovations and energy topics too, focusing on direct pollution, emission, and carbon footprint with a systemic approach. We sail around the world and stop in many iconic cities, meeting pioneers. We develop solutions for a more sustainable world because we are the first French ambassadors of the SDGs of the UN. Our mission is to raise awareness of the widest audience and to the challenge of the ecological transition. So this year we should cross the Pacific and go to Tokyo for the Olympics. During the Olympics, even if it is quite difficult to get there today, the Japanese are very cautious about the COVID. Then we go to Singapore at the beginning of next year, across the Indian Ocean, South Africa. Then we should reach Brazil in Rio de Janeiro. Then on the east coast of the US before heading back to France for during the next Olympic Games.
So I have a problem. Just a word about our floating laboratory. I want to say that we work in a brutal and corrosive environment with high tension batteries and hydrogen, and I sleep close to these energy tanks and feel very safe. The technologies we have developed on board are very reliable, safe, and efficient. There is a recent picture of our ship which just went through the Panama Canal and is sailing in the Pacific from now. And it is interesting to see our ship next to the big commercial ships. It is obvious that the energy system of our ship is not adapted to large ships that need a lot of power and huge quantities of energy. So we have to put aside gaseous hydrogen event at 700 bars in order to favor other forms of energy storage, such as liquid hydrogen or ammonia. But I will let Erwan Jacquin from CMA CGM talk about this later. In any case, I can tell you that we are starting to work on the Energy Observer 2 project. Our future laboratory ship of about 45 meters in length, which in any case will explore the integration of liquid hydrogen. If you are interested in becoming a technical or industrial partner of this great project, I invite you to contact us by email. I've got so many other things to talk to you about, but I will overpace our timeline. Many thanks for your attention, and please feel free to ask me and Louis Noël for any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victorian and Louis Noël. That's I have a lot of questions, so we'll keep getting through these. This is exciting. Next, we're pleased to welcome representatives of several of the partners of the Energy Observer and offer their insights and comments. They represent Air Liquide, CMA CGM Group, Engie, and Toyota. We're going to start off first with, and welcome to Dave Edwards representing Air Liquide. I'll add that Dave is a very active member within the Fuel Cell Partnership here and its leadership team. And for Air Liquide, Dave is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal and external partnerships with industry, academia, government entities, and others to advance the technology and business opportunities in hydrogen energy for Air Liquide in the United States. He's been with Air Liquide for more than 20 years in R&D and hydrogen business roles. And it's with great pleasure I welcome Dave.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. I'm not quite even sure where to start after such a fantastic introduction from the boat. The production of hydrogen is going to seem very mundane because our production is at the other end of the pipeline, bringing the energy into these new applications. But thank you very much for the introduction. Why don't we go to my first slide? Just a quick introduction to Air Liquide. If you're not familiar with who we are, we're a producer of industrial gases. Those gases are things like nitrogen, argon, and oxygen, and of course hydrogen. And for us, hydrogen is one of our core technology developments. We've been in the market for a very long time. Air Liquide is a very large international company. We're a proud sponsor of the Energy Observer and other energy-related topics, and the area of hydrogen is core for us. Let's go to the next slide. The important thing for Air Liquide is enabling not just the markets, but also our customers and also our employees to have a low carbon society. And in the last month, Air Liquide has formalized this commitment through our sustainability targets. If you go to the next slide, we've made a public commitment to making significant carbon reductions in our own activities and in our customers' activities. By 2025, just a few years away, we expect to have 30% reduction in our carbon intensity on a per dollar basis. And that number becomes an absolute value of 1/3 decrease by 2035, with the overall target of having carbon neutrality by the year 2050. And that puts us on a similar pathway to a lot of the major nations and a lot in the state of California and other regions in the country and the world that are on zero carbon pathways. For us, this means looking at our current processes, our future processes, and how our customers use our products in order to understand how to meet these kind of targets. If we go to the next slide. And hydrogen is the cornerstone, not just of Air Liquide making that transition, but as the Energy Observer has pointed out, it enables things like energy storage. It ties us to zero carbon production and allows us to bring this new renewable fuel to a whole variety of transportation applications and energy applications. Let's go to the next slide. And for Air Liquide, this means not only an increase in our own markets. Our markets could increase from about $2 billion today to about $6 billion by 2035, so a significant opportunity for us. But in order to get there, in order to do the things like invest in low carbon and renewable hydrogen as an offer, in order to decarbonize our existing industrial applications, we have committed to spending more than 8 billion euros in CapEx in order to meet these requirements. And this includes everything from decarbonizing our current plants with carbon capture, investing in electrolyzers, and managing that supply chain for mobility and making acquisitions. And along the electrolyzer front, it means a promise of investment of 3 gigawatts of energy for electrolyzer production by 2035. Let's go to the next slide. But we're not just talking about the future, we're also talking about the activities we're doing today. Air Liquide has been in the hydrogen business for about 75 years. We produce 1.2 million tons of hydrogen per year today. We have thousands of miles of pipelines. We have many large production facilities. We're just getting into the electrolyzer business with our first major 20 megawatt project. And as I said before, about $2 billion of sales in hydrogen. And all of the projects that I've shown on the map here are the kind of investments that are leading to these new energy developments. Most of them are around transportation, whether it's around hydrogen refueling stations or hydrogen vehicles or hydrogen mobility applications, or through the production of the renewable hydrogen that is enabling that as a transportation fuel. Let's go to the next slide. I'd like to point out 2 examples of projects that we've already committed to and already have started in the Americas. In the northeast part of the United States, we have at Bécancour, Canada, in Quebec, our first project for very large electrolyzers up and running, producing renewable hydrogen into the markets today. In November of last year, we brought this system online, and as of January of this year, it's in full production mode. It was a $42 million investment on a 20 megawatt PEM electrolyzer, with nearly 100% of that electricity being renewable hydrogen from hydropower in Canada. It produces about 8.5 tons per day of hydrogen, and it strengthens our supply of renewables into the Northeast. Now let's look at the next slide. We're also in the middle of the construction of our largest committed project dedicated specifically to these new mobility markets. And this is a $200 million investment in the production and liquefaction of hydrogen in the Las Vegas, Nevada, in North Las Vegas. It's 30 tons per day of production, which, by the way, is enough for about 40,000 fuel cell electric vehicles on the market, and has flexible production in order to meet the renewable hydrogen requirements that this market drives for. And this one is to strengthen our mobility markets across the Western United States. With that, I think the last slide is a thank you. Recognizing that any questions around hydrogen production and how we bring hydrogen into these markets, I'd be more than happy to address during the question section. Back to you, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for the presentation. And I'll just say personally, thanks for the new production plans, East and West. Keep them coming. We love that. Next up, we're excited to have Kim Carnahan with Engie Impact join us today, where she serves, as the Director of Disruption Technologies. She leads Engie's group's green hydrogen business development in the United States and oversees Engie Impact's advisory services related to alternative fuels, including green hydrogen and sustainable aviation and maritime fuels. Prior to her work here with Engie, Kim most recently served as the United States Chief Negotiator for Climate Change. So over nearly a decade at the State Department, she managed the teams that negotiated the Paris Agreement and other agreements. And I'll say, as I introduce you, Kim, and welcome you, thank you for all of that work. I can only imagine.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here today representing Engie as we celebrate the Energy Observer and introduce it to a broader audience. Next slide, please. At Engie, our mission is to accelerate the transition to a net zero economy. We have more than halved our own greenhouse gas emissions since 2015, and we have a validated science-based target in place and a plan to meet that ambitious target as well. You know, we are a major player in renewable energy with a total capacity of over 31 gigawatts around the globe. I realized after I sent in this slide that actually my slides haven't kept up with our growth. So there on the slide, it says even less than the reality. Here in the United States, just this past year, we developed nearly 2 gigawatts of renewable energy, bringing our total capacity to 3 gigawatts in the US. And while we continue to set an aggressive pace for adding renewable energy, we're also a leader in low carbon energy services, second globally in electric vehicle charging stations, for example. And we are committed to innovating and advancing new technologies like offshore wind, new storage innovations, and green gas, notably green hydrogen. Which brings us back to today's event. I mean, Engie's investment in the Energy Observer began in 2017 when we were inspired both by the mission and by the vessel itself, which we see as an example of the future we seek as a company, a future where the world is powered entirely by clean, renewable energy technologies working together. And we're particularly inspired by the onboard creation of hydrogen through seawater electrolysis. I'm with Keith in the opening. This is just really kind of a wow show of the technology and what it can do. Next slide. Engie is really all in on green hydrogen generated by electrolysis powered by renewable energy. So we created a dedicated green hydrogen business unit in early 2018, which works hand in hand with Engie's thematic research labs and Engie regional subsidiaries all over the globe, including Engie North America, where I'm based, to support our customers as they work to innovate and decarbonize some of the hardest to abate sectors and activities, with the help of green hydrogen. After 3 years now, we have well over 20 hydrogen projects across 10 countries and 5 continents, not to mention a vast network of partnerships with global players. Next slide, please. We have purposely cultivated this broad set of experiences and engaged with, frankly, kind of a shockingly wide set of actors because Engie's strategy is focused on developing industrial scale hydrogen hubs that bring together multiple applications and multiple partners. We support standalone projects, all the time, of course, but really our vision is for how hydrogen can more quickly take off is by bringing along a lot of players at the same time. And part of this is because green hydrogen still carries a cost premium compared to gray hydrogen or other alternative or other fuels like diesel, and we need to reach a certain size of a project to reach maximum cost reduction. And reaching that size will often require pulling together multiple off-takers. But in addition, we know from experience that engaging multiple off-takers and multiple economic players in a given project and kind of showing the decarbonization benefits for all of them is helpful when seeking government grants and tax benefits, both of which are basically required for a project to reach the execution phase right now, not just in the US, but globally. We're seeing most of our customers really wait until there's some sort of policy support to engage kind of fully into the green hydrogen market. And finally, the transport systems and the infrastructure needed to support widespread hydrogen usage simply make more sense when they're shared, and that also leads us towards the hub model. Next slide, please. Our vision is that hydrogen will develop massively in the coming years, but to realize that vision, it's necessary to be really laser focused on cost, and Engie has chosen to be a hydrogen integrator working across the entire hydrogen value chain from renewable energy to transport and delivery, because through control of that integration process, we are able to optimize each of the building blocks along it. Next slide. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll end here with a quick scan of some of my favorite Engie hydrogen projects globally. The Zero Emission Valley project in particular, we are partnering with Michelin on that and the local government. In that project, we're putting in place 20 refueling stations, each with their own on-site electrolyzers. The Uri project in Australia is a co-creation of the first green ammonia production plant globally. The Rhino project in South Africa, we're co-creating the first hydrogen mining truck solution. And the Jupiter 1000 project in France is one of two of the projects that we're running or have run where we've been blending hydrogen into the natural gas infrastructure to prove that it is safe for use in residential homes. Those are just a few examples. This space is expanding really rapidly, and I'm leading Engie's hydrogen business development in the US, as you mentioned in the opening, and I'm really overrun by interest from companies beginning to integrate green hydrogen into their decarbonization plans. Anywhere from small scale pilots for utilities to our, I think our largest in development now is 30 tons per day, a 71 megawatt electrolyzer system. So there's a lot of range in what they're doing, but they and we are very focused on policy incentives that help us get projects over the line to implementation. And that's one of the reasons that we love projects like Energy Observer, which help inspire us to accelerate our focus on decarbonization and kind of prove that zero carbon technologies, including hydrogen, aren't just something to hope for in the future. They're here today, and we just need to put in place the incentives to really take them to scale. Thanks very much.
Wow, thank you, Kim. I'm just going to keep saying wow after all this, because what I think I see, Keith and our team, Ben, that we've got a number of different future webinars possible with all of this information and dissect it kind of piece by piece. So great information with that. Thank you, Kim. Next up, we're pleased to welcome Erwan Jacquin to the program. In 2020, he joined CMA CGM as Director of R&D with a focus on decarbonized maritime transport activities, including the terminals and the logistics. He has a long professional history in maritime-related activities, including the French Ministry of Defense, the technical center there dedicated to Navy ship performance. He is the founder of two companies, Hydro Ocean and Nextflow Software, and served as the CEO of the Bureau Veritas Solutions. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for inviting me and also giving me the opportunity to present CMA CGM Group and our partnership with Energy Observer. As you can see in this picture, we are together with Energy Observer on the same way on the road to shipping decarbonization. This is just very simply the biggest challenge our industry has to solve in a very short time. A ship during the lifespan is around 25 years. We have to reach carbon neutrality in 2050. So we just have 5 years to put on the water carbon neutral ships. So it's a big, big challenge for industry. And for that, we have two partnerships, including Energy Observer. Next slide, please. So CMA CGM, yes, can we, next slide, thank you. CMA CGM is a global logistic company. Our revenue is around $30 billion. The company started 45 years ago with only few container ships operation. Today, we operate around 600 ships, or we are just the third shipping company worldwide. We operate 48 terminals, hundreds of warehouses worldwide with Seva Logistics, which is a company we acquired a few years ago. And also now we have 4 airplanes. So CMA CGM is a global door-to-door logistic company providing a solution to our clients. Next slide, please. Yes, thanks. So, what is the containership? You can see in this picture our flagship. Flagship is CMA CGM Group from the name of the founder of the company 45 years ago. It is a 400-meter length, and today our flagship is propelled by GNL, liquid natural gas. This is not a carbon neutral solution, but it allows to reduce CO2 emission up to 20% and also to drastically reduce air pollution. As you can understand, today there is no solution to propel such a big ship with carbon neutral energies. You have to understand that such ship needs around 80 megawatts of powers with a huge autonomy, because the ship has to sail 20 knots during more than 40 days. So you can imagine that if you want to use liquid hydrogen for such ship, it is a very huge amount of energies, and today it's just not possible. So that's why we are partnering with energy observers. Next slide, please. Just because we are on the same way to zero emission shipping. We share the same ambition and challenge to develop zero emission shipping, with also a group commitment to be carbon neutral in 2050. We are also very happy to see that the United States is now also focusing on the same objective, with the last week announcement of Joe Biden to support the International Maritime Organization, IMO, to adopt a goal of achieving zero emission from international shipping by 2050, which is exactly the same objective as CMA CGM. So to reach this objective, we need to use a lot of new technologies and to be inspired by energy observers, and also to use carbon neutral energy. So next slide. Just an example of what could be the future of containership. First, what we have to do is exactly the same as energy observer. We have to save energy where we can. So we need to optimize the hull design. We need to use wind assistance. And it is exactly the same sales as used by energy observers. So the tests that are now doing by energy observer are very important for us to see the reliability of such wind assistance devices. We have also to develop smart capabilities, because when you are smart, you are green. You have access to data monitoring to identify other consumption of ships. You are able also to optimize the weather routing, exactly as that is done by energy observers today. And last but not least, to use low carbon energies. For that, today we are testing some biofuel and biogas, but there is a limited feedstock, so it's not the global solution for shipping industries. Or you can also use e-fuels, such as liquid hydrogen or ammonia. And it's exactly what we are doing now. We are developing some R&D projects, starting now with different partners, including, for example, Engie and Liquide, to develop such ships. So our target is to have such ships sailing perhaps in the next 10 or more years. So it's a very big challenge for engineers, and we are fully committed on this project. Thank you.
There, thank you. Sorry, get my mute off and get back online here. Thank you, Arwan. That's we in California on the land side of transportation are talking a lot about scale and going from market launch to scaling up. And I'll just say you've kind of put that to shame with some of your work in scale. So that's exciting to see just how big things can go and where it's going next. So with that, I want to introduce our next and final speaker before questions. And I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker is Jared Farnsworth, who's a principal engineer with Toyota's fuel cell group. He's had 15 years experience with Toyota in developing and testing fuel cell vehicles, including the brand new Mirai that many of you are starting to see. And I can say personally, our team here has had a long history with Jared and his team, and it's really excited to see and have this opportunity, and we're happy to have you, Jared, join us and present on behalf of Toyota.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to share about Toyota's vision for fuel cell technology. I'm a little excited because normally they don't let engineers out to speak to people, so this is going to be fun. Please go ahead to the next slide. So in 2015, Toyota announced our Environmental Challenge 2050, and this is really our vision and roadmap towards developing sustainability in all aspects of society, but specifically within Toyota, how do we do this from the vehicle to production to every aspect? Please go next slide. You know, there's 6 different areas, and I'm not going to focus on each area. I'm just going to focus on the first challenge, which is moving towards zero emissions for the actual vehicles, the mobility side of this challenge. Next slide. And within Toyota, we have a portfolio of technologies that we're developing to achieve this goal, from plug-in hybrids and hybrid vehicles to battery electric vehicles, and then finally fuel cell vehicles. Now, fuel cells are going to play a very significant and integral role towards meeting that environmental challenge. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, is the quick fueling capability with hydrogen, as well as the high infrastructure throughput capability with hydrogen. The second is due to hydrogen storage, we can have longer driving ranges with vehicles. And then finally, it's the scalability of fuel cell technology that allows us to look at a lot of different applications. So that's why hydrogen and fuel cells are so important for us to meet that 2050 challenge. Next slide. Now, as a little background, Toyota started developing fuel cell technology in the mid-90s. And on the corners of the page, you can see different prototypes, fuel cell vehicles throughout the years. And some of you may have seen these, and these represented kind of one-off or in the maybe level of hundreds of vehicles for demonstration programs. And from what we learned from these demonstration programs in 2010, we made the decision to move towards a truly fully production fuel cell vehicles. And that culminated in the first generation Toyota fuel cell Mirai, which you can see that line in the middle there. And actually the fuel cell system from this vehicle is what is used in the Energy Observer. Next slide. And as I mentioned, one big advantage for fuel cell technologies or strengths is scalability. So about the same time that we launched the Gen 1 Mirai, we began developing heavy duty fuel cell trucks. And what's pictured here is a project we called Project Portal. This is a collaboration with the Port of Los Angeles, Kenworth, and Shell to develop 10 Class 8 fuel cell trucks that pull cargo to and from the port in LA. And these are fully capable Class 8 trucks, 80,000 pound capacity, 300 miles. And these trucks are on the road actually right now as we speak, pulling cargo out of the port. Another interesting kind of smaller application within the port is the containers are moved within the port with these smaller utility tractor rigs, and that's pictured on the top left. We're actually able to develop a prototype vehicle to move those around the port itself. So it's not only just larger transportation, but even smaller applications like this example for heavy duty is where we're looking. Next slide. And coming to where we are now, late 2020, we launched the Gen 2 Toyota Mirai. And this Mirai represents kind of some significant improvements in technology and manufacturing for fuel cells. So as far as technology, there's improved power performance and durability from the fuel cell system, increased fuel economy and increased range. And on the manufacturing side, for the first generation Mirai, our production targets were around 3,000 units per year. And for the second generations, we've increased that by 10 times that amount. So this represents kind of that next stage and the next step as we ramp up production of this technology. Okay, next slide. And finally, this kind of goes to where are we going? What do we see for fuel cells? And as I mentioned, fuel cells can be adapted to a lot of different applications. At the top, you can see there's a little fuel cell forklift, and that's used in our Motomachi plants in Japan, and that's a kind of an emerging market for fuel cells. From light duty to medium duty, on the bottom left, we developed some medium duty applications in Japan. And then for heavy duty, things like the fuel cell buses, our Class 8 trucks, and a lot of different applications in heavy duty. And then you can see on the top right, we have the energy observer. So that's another great example of beyond just traditional mobility where Toyota's involved to like maritime applications. And finally, we're also developing stationary applications. On the bottom right is a stationary fuel cell generator that we use at some facilities in Japan. And so for us, fuel cells are a very important part of our future at Toyota, and it's going to be a critical role in helping us meet our larger long-term sustainability goals. And next slide, I think that's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Jared. Fabulous and great to see that vehicle out on the road. I know you've spent a lot of time bringing that to market. So, and thanks to all of our panelists and presenters. With that, I think we're doing very well on time. And so we'll proceed to jump right in and ask the question and answer section of today's briefing. And it looks like we do have a lot of questions, and Ben, Keith, and our team will help steer some of those in a moment. I did want to point out that most of the Energy Observer team are sailors and not necessarily technical people. So maybe some of these questions will be have to be addressed elsewhere or offline. But with that, I'd like to start with the first question, and it's pretty wide. I have some background in sailing, nothing to this magnitude or anything like this, yet having spent a lot of times working on the engines in need and preventative maintenance, as well as just how they operate at sea, I really am curious what you think the Energy Observer is different, what sets it apart from vessels that don't have that integration of wind, solar, hydrogen, fuel cells, batteries, etc. In operation, how do you find that being different? Or do you?
Yeah, the biggest difference by far that the ship is autonomous. You know, that's a big difference. So yes, it's the average speed, let's say, is about 6 knots, which is quite, you know, different from these big container carriers. But the thing is that you don't have to refuel, so you don't have to look for a port of call. You don't have, you know, to organize all your trip following the next station available, as most of the yachts, you know, in the Mediterranean, are just going to, you know, to one service station to another. We just don't care about that. You know, we are fully autonomous. During the very beginning of the pandemic, for instance, we were stuck on the boat for more than 2 months with absolutely no authorization to land in Canarias, in Capo Verde, in the Caribbean, so they had to stay on board. And they had plenty of water, plenty of energy. They could fish, and they could make some deals, you know, with the local fishermen for them to bring them some vegetables, because it is the only thing that they do not produce on board yet. But you know, yeah, the autonomy changed totally your way of sailing. And the other thing, maybe the biggest difference for as a sailor, I mean, is the silence, because you don't have, you know, this permanent roaring noise day and night of a diesel engine. Apart from that, on the facts, on the figures, obviously there are many differences. That I think it's a total new culture, because for decades and generations, you know, the sailors have been with the hand in the grease, in the diesel, in oily, you know, bunks and stuff, and all of a sudden you're on an electric propulsion, you know, with touch screens, very clean and dry contacts, boards and stuff. And yeah, it's a revolution. But because the maritime world is a very big consumer of energy and very big consumer of hydrogen potentially, we think it's very important to think global and to include the maritime users to the global hydrogen society. Because, for instance, even a small boat here in San Francisco Bay, you know, they must be using between 200 and 300 kilograms of hydrogen per day, which is the equivalent of 200 or 300 cars, near-eyes. You know, so if you can gather all these users, we think that the maritime world can actually accelerate the energy transition to hydrogen and to electric mobility. Yeah, sorry, I just went a little out from your question path.
No, that's fantastic. So I went immediately to working in a closed, dirty box to the engine compartment, and I had also forgotten not only the quietness when you spend a lot of years turned on that engine to motor around, but that untethered aspect is really an interesting freedom for sailing. So that's a really great thing. I now will turn, I think, both to Ben of our team and Margot. I think we have some additional questions and let them field the ones that are coming through. Quite a few, looks like.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you all to all the presenters. So we do have a number of questions, and for attendees, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the GoToWebinar questions feature. Type in your questions, and we'll answer them in the order that we receive them. So the first question is towards, I believe this is for Jared, and it's regarding the Toyota fuel cell stack. What is the Toyota fuel cell power output and the generation of the fuel cells on board the Energy Observer?
Yeah, I believe the output was 60 kilowatt. I did not participate directly with this program, but I believe that's the correct.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yep, and it's based upon our Gen 1 system.
Great, awesome. And Margot and I are just going to swap back and forth. And actually, I'm going to ask one more question for Jared. It's regarding the fuel cell again. So with the Mirai fuel cells, will Mirai fuel cells be able to affordably be refurbished at the end of the fuel cell life?
I think that's something we're looking at. Right now, we're working towards developing our fuel cells to last the entire life of the vehicle. So that's our intention. And we're also looking at efficient ways to recycle our fuel cell stacks. But that's an interesting idea that we're also considering.
Thank you, Jared. Margot?
Yes, I have another question for Louis-Noël or Victorien. Why did you choose a catamaran design for Energy Observer?
You want to answer it? No, we wanted to recycle. We wanted to have the minimum carbon footprint. So we had the choice either to build a new boat around an hydrogen complete chain, or to recycle a former racing boat into this floating laboratory. But to have the idea of recycling this historical craft, because this catamaran was Enza, New Zealand, the record-breaking catamaran of Sir Peter Blake. So, we thought it was a good story to use a former racing boat who had been about 5 times racing around the world, breaking speed record, to change it into a new generation of a boat. Of course, it's much slower now, but it's still, trying to break records in terms of autonomy and to push the boundaries of the energy. It was a nice story, and we thought at the very beginning that it was cheaper, by the way, to retrofit a whole boat. The reality is quite different, because now we know that it's probably cheaper to build a boat around the system rather than the other way around. But the idea was to be carbon neutral.
And did you have any problem with the compressor of the boat? Because it seems that it's the major problem with the hydrogen station currently.
No, now it works quite well. The thing is that there is no hydrogen compressor suitable for this kind of a low power system. Most of the compressors on the market today are big machines, very heavy, and they take a lot of room. So we have nothing available on the market. So we decided to use a small azote compressor and to modify them. So we have worked on many membranes. We have redesigned the head of the compressor. We have worked a lot on this. But the electrolyzer is very reliable. It's come from Proton on site in the US. It has been totally modified, but it's very durable now. And the compression stages, yes, one of the compression stages is still under work, let's say under progress. but it works fine. I mean, we don't have any issue with the global system, but it's not very easy to create from not from scratch, but to design and to create the first small hydrogen compressor.
So I think the next question might be best answered by multiple panelists. And the question is, what is the biggest operational challenge with interfacing all of these different systems?
No,
to find money. To find money to build the ship.
Yes, to find money to build the ship. Yeah. No, but yeah, of course. No, on the technical point of view, the money question is, I mean, we have many partnerships with many technical and technological partners, from Toyota, of course, but to Rockwell, Swagelock, Solbian, many pioneers of this new and renewable technologies are working with us, and of course, they provide us with the equipment, with the components, and then we just try, to adapt them to this specific use. No, the added value of the system is a smart grid, is a EMS, the energy management system, which allows us to use wind when there is not enough sun, and when we have too much sun and wind, we can store our surplus of energy in hydrogen on a long-term basis. And it's a kind of a smart grid and you will find exactly the same issues on the land. I mean, in some areas you will have a lot of sun. In some areas you will have a lot of wind. Sometimes you will have some geothermal resources, and then you just need to adapt your smart grid to your environment. And if you do it properly, that's the biggest the challenge, to find the best way to make all these energies work together. But thanks to hydrogen, the biggest problem with this renewable is intermittency. So the big advantage of hydrogen is that you can store your energy for quite a long term, and that's a game changer. Absolutely.
Maybe just quickly on the fuel cell side, a big challenge for us in this application was the fuel cell system was optimized and designed for a light duty vehicle. So whenever you change applications like this, there's a lot of engineering and reconfiguring to make it work. And kind of as a response to this type of challenge, we are now launching what we're calling power units for fuel cells. And those are designed to be integrated easily into these type of applications, or any type of application. So maybe that's one big learning is it's always hard to re-engineer optimized systems. So in this case, we're coming out with a new power module unit for future.
And this is Dave. I would just add that one of the real challenges when you think about the energy observer, it's an excellent example of what can be done with hydrogen, what can be done with batteries, and what can be done with renewables on a small scale. But now think about doing that at a grid level. The challenge at that level becomes one of scale. The technologies exist. We've demonstrated them. We've been able to use them, but we don't want to do it at kilowatt and megawatt levels. We want to do it at gigawatt levels, and that brings its own challenges of scale. And of course, the value of hydrogen comes with its ability to scale at those levels.
Yeah. If you wish, we have 2 or 3 slides that we can show to you about the product. So yes, it is based on the Toyota fuel cell. So it's designed to be used outdoor. But it is the first example of a land-based application that we have, developed following the energy observer experience. So if Victorien, you can just show the.
Is it possible to share my screen, please?
Yes. Let me give that to you really quickly.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
So you see, with it's a subsidiary that we have created, EODev. So we have developed this first genset. On the photo above, you got the first prototypes, which was tested in a Caterpillar distributor in France, in area. And at the bottom, you see the last generation with a wider cooling system, because this fuel cell works. We have different kind of cooling system on board. Energy Observer, of course, it's a water system. It's a liquid cooling system, and in this genset that we have developed, it's a air induction which cools up the system. So this genset have been sold to some ports and harbors in France, and it has been sold to some renting company like Loxam. Loxam, Agreco, all these companies are using thousands of the genset on big events. Of course, for us, the goal is to be there for the Paris Olympics in 2024, because we need a lot of power in the street, in the center of the city, and they don't have enough power out of the grid to power everything. So we are working hard to have a sufficient number of these units for the Paris Olympics. And then we have the maritime application. So we have launched the boat that you see here. It was on the Monaco Yacht Club some month ago that the first pleasure boat, pleasure craft. Actually, it's a taxi boat, because in the Mediterranean, you've got many marine protected areas now where you cannot get in with a diesel engine. So there is a rush of all these, professional taxis and pleasure craft to find solutions. So that was the first one, and it's this boat is called Innova. It's using the Toyota fuel cell 2 with gaseous tanks that you see at 350 bars. That's the two first examples of the concrete industrial project that we are developing.
Thank you. Margot, did you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
Yeah. Yes, and I have another one for Louis-Noël and Victorien. How is the performance of the ship crossing a stormy sea?
Crossing what?
A stormy sea.
As we told you, this boat is very seaworthy. She has been around the world at speeds above 20 knots in huge, seas across the Cape Horn, and so the design of the boat, allows her to go very fast. It's very strong. It was built in Canada in '83 and launched in '86, I guess. Yeah, and so the carbon fiber by this time was a little bit heavier than the latest high modulus carbon fiber, but racing boats, when they are well built, are just indestructible. They are very strong. So we have absolutely no doubt about the seaworthiness of this boat. We have been through more than 60 knots of wind, huge waves. Even off the Californian coast, about 3 days ago, when we left Long Beach, they were supposed to have 2.5, 3 meters of waves. Actually, they had 3.5 up to 4 meters of waves coming straight in the nose. Yeah, it's very wet. So, but the good side of it is that we are testing a lot of corrosion issues. We know with the high pressure connectors, with the pipings. So we received a lot of salty water on board, but that's the only limit of this boat, is that the design is quite old. I mean the design of the hulls, and it's quite low on the water. So all the equipments are exposed to a huge amount of water and salt, but apart from that, the boat is very safe, and we have been through very heavy seas and winds with absolutely no problem.
Great.
Thank you.
But above 4 meters, we do a stopover in Morro Bay.
Yeah. Yeah. And Morro Bay is very beautiful, so it was a good excuse to go to Morro Bay.
I've got a question for Dave Edwards at Liquide. What does flexible production mean?
So flexible production for us, it goes back to those two projects. What it means is that we can produce low carbon hydrogen from a number of different ways. We can use electricity in electrolysis. We can use reforming of renewable natural gas, for example. And if you think about the feedstocks for renewable natural gas, that would be things like landfill gas or digester gas. And for things like electrolysis, it's wind, solar, and hydro, all to produce low carbon hydrogen. We also have the ability at some of our sites to capture a waste hydrogen stream from a chlor-alkali plant, which can also be low carbon, but not necessarily renewable. So flexible just means that one of the nice things about hydrogen is that you're able to produce it by many different mechanisms. And as a result, it interfaces with the existing energy infrastructure quite nicely because you can use many different resources to produce it.
Great.
Thank you.
Dave, another question for you too is, can you estimate the potential demand for hydrogen for ship fuel, specifically for California?
Yeah, I didn't have a good number for what the maritime fuel use is, but if you know how much diesel or gasoline is used today, a general rule of thumb, you can say that 1 kilogram of hydrogen will replace about 2 gallons of diesel or gasoline in a fuel cell application, and that's a really rough rule of thumb, but you might be able to get some estimates of how much hydrogen would be required if you knew how much maritime fuel is being used. I don't have a good feel for how it replaces bunker fuel, for example, however.
Great. Margot?
Yes, I have a question for Louis-Noël and Victoria also. How long did it take to construct the boat of Energy Observer?
The initial building in '83, it took about 2 years, I guess, but the construction that you organize you on your site, you started the project in 2013.
Yes.
And you launched the boat in 2017. Actually, they have built up the full system from the desalinization electrolyzer. The full chain has been built in the CEA facilities in Grenoble, tested, and then it was dismantled and installed on board the boat.
2 years.
So it took about 2 years just to fit all the systems on board. But it's on the other hand, we modify so many components every year because it's a floating laboratory. So we always optimize, upgrade everything. The piping, as I told you, the high pressure connectors, the solar panels. Every year we add new generations of solar panels. We optimize the compression stages. We have changed the fuel cell last year with the help of Toyota. So it's difficult to say. It's not an initial building and then a long sailing. It's a floating laboratory, and we keep on modifying, upgrading every component every year. That's the bad side of having 2 engineers on board. Is that they always find, ways to optimize and components to upgrade. So you just spend all your budget on these, things.
Great.
This new budget each year.
Yes.
So next question, I think this question is for Kim. What can we do to help accelerate adoption of renewables in the maritime sector? What policy innovations funding?
Excellent question. I don't have a long list of all the things that could be done, but certainly I think partnerships among multiple countries will be incredibly helpful. Right now, I'm working with a couple of NGOs, environmental NGOs, to try to get the first ever kind of intercontinental route funded to do a kind of a pilot project for a green ammonia shipping lane. So that's something that we are, trying to get funded, and there are a lot of governments that are working in similar funding efforts. So I'd say pool funds among different countries and work with them jointly to start to get some of these test cases out there, because right now we're really struggling to kind of focus in on one particular technology solution in maritime. It's in a different state than the aviation sector, actually, where at least right now there's a lot of focus on like biogenic biofuel based sustainable aviation fuel. And for maritime, there's a number of different options, and no one has really chosen which way to go, which I think is actually causing some confusion in the market.
Great, thanks, Kim. And Erwin, would you like to add on to that as well, to that question?
No, I share the comment of Kim. I think it's a long road now, and we have to evaluate the different opportunities and solutions. And the choice is not done yet.
Yep.
And any others that would like to chime in on that question?
So this is Dave. I would just comment that just about any of these transportation sectors that are converting to hydrogen, you need to think about policies in three ways. You need to encourage people to adopt the new vehicle. So in the case of maritime, is there an encouragement for those ships to ship because there's either a regulatory policy or an encouragement for the purchase, for example? There also needs to be the infrastructure for the refueling, both in this case for port area storage and development. And then you need to think about the fuel. You want to make sure that you're encouraging low carbon fuels because that's the entire purpose of the program. So in most cases, we think about the policy in those three different sectors, and it might be different for light duty vehicles than heavy duty vehicles than maritime than aviation, but almost always you need to address those three different categories.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for instance, we have some contacts with Airbus as Air One and CMA CGM, of course, but one of their first, priority is to find a solution for the APU, the auxiliary power unit they have in the tail of the plane. That gives power to the, to the lighting system and to the air conditioning when the plane is at dock, is docked, and because it's very noisy and very polluting on the airport, and the airports are asking the companies to find a solution to have more silent and cleaner APUs, and these APUs do not need a lot of power, so probably there are some short-term solutions to address this most urgent problems of noise and pollution in the airports, and in the range of power which is quite close to what we do for the super yachts and for the maritime community. The other thing is that we believe that for instance in the Mediterranean you've got more and more protected areas, as I told you, where you cannot use your diesel genset, for instance. So you've got these big yachts and super yachts over there, and more and more year after year they just discover that they just cannot moor in these beautiful areas, of the west of Corsica, in the Porcro, in many of the most beautiful places over there. They just don't have the right to moor and to stay for the night. So what's the use of having a $200 million super yacht if you don't have the right to go in the most beautiful places? And the other thing that most of these guys have beautiful girlfriends, and a lot of them are doing some yoga in the morning and so on, and they don't like to go for their yoga with a diesel genset, with 4 diesel genset running, just because it's too noisy and it makes a lot of fumes and so on. So the idea that if there is no more yogi girlfriends on the super yachts, you don't have your friends coming. So at the end of the story, you're by yourself with your 200,000 horsepower in the harbor of Monaco, and just a useless thing. So yeah, they need this solution on a very short term. They call us every week. We have they ask for quotes, and it's not very easy to address this, because each of these project is one design for one super yacht. So it's not, for us, it's not very interesting, because it's not. We would like to have something much more scalable, to be effective on the climate change challenge, and not to address only the rich guy. But on the other hand, we think that it's getting faster and faster, and that we have more and more inquiries, and the hydrogen transition is going very fast, much faster than we believed only 2 years ago. That's for sure.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for probably 2 more questions. Margot, I'm going to see if you do you have a question for the panelists?
Yes, I think that Victorien said it already, but Can you repeat how long will be the Odyssey of the boat?
How long will be the Odyssey of the boat? We'll go. This boat will be used until the Paris Olympics. That's 2024.
Thank you.
Actually, that was a quick answer, so I think we'll have time for a couple more questions. There are a lot of questions around the Energy Observer 2. Can you share what's the plans for the future of Energy Observer? And I think you talked a little about Energy Observer 2.
No, the thing is that this boat, yeah, it looks like a spacecraft. So it's very inspiring, especially for the students, for the engineers, but the thing is that the maritime community has difficulties to identify themselves into this kind of carbon fiber catamaran. It looks too different from a cargo ship or fishing boat or a passenger boat, not to say on a container carrier like Air One's. So the idea for the next boat is to have something much more typical, classical in the design, probably aluminium, probably with a liquid hydrogen or maybe some ammonia or maybe both. It has to be a floating laboratory but a floating laboratory which can work on the challenges of much bigger boats. The idea should be that this boat has to be the floating laboratory, maybe of a French consortium working on liquid hydrogen, ammonia, as I told you, some hydrodynamic issues, a new generation of propellers. Most of the issues that everyone showed in his slides, the next boat will be much more oriented on the shipping industry and on the professional maritime community than the present boat, which is much more like, super big catamaran. It's very difficult to imagine what would be the use of the Energy Observer 1, because it's so strange in the design. Nobody can imagine to carry containers on it or to carry passengers. It's not a speedboat either. So yeah, the next boat would be something not much bigger, but not much bigger. But it will be a totally disruptive in terms of technology.
And the challenge will be to do the maximum average speed in all over the world with only one refuel of liquid hydrogen.
And so I'm going to ask one more question, and we'll end the Q&A. And this is for Dave Edwards. There's a question from a couple of fuel cell drivers asking, fuel cell drivers are looking forward to the Las Vegas plant opening. When might this occur? I'm asking for a few thousand others.
Yeah, I can understand why a few thousand people are asking that question. We expect to be up and operational at the end of November and full production early next year. So it's a few months away. There'll be a lot of exciting announcements, and keep an eye on dates, because we'll probably have some kind of opening and a few other things that bring some attention to that. But right now, I think the end of the year, we'll have new hydrogen, bulk hydrogen production feeding into the California markets.
Thank you, Dave. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bill to end, and also to see if there's any closing remarks. But before that, I just want to thank everyone for attending. We will continue to host these hydrogen policy series. If you have any suggestions or any questions, please do contact Keith and myself. Our emails are on the screen. And again, thank you all for attending. And Bill, with that, I'll hand off to you.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot I can add to this. This has been a great discussion. I want to thank all the presenters. I want to thank everyone who made the Energy Observer possible, from the sailors and the engineers to all the sponsors and everyone involved. This does have that wow factor that really shows off these technologies and how renewable fuel cells, hydrogen, batteries can and should work together in this microcosm. And I think together we'll all, as stakeholders in this market, look for ways we can find the next variation of this, whether it be Energy Observer 2, be it something on land, on water, or something in between. So again, thank you all, and thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to next time. Have a great afternoon or evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.